This is Barbara with Cana Girl Speaks podcast. My voice, your voice. Good evening, everybody. This is Barbara with the Cana Girl Speaks podcast, and I'm always excited to be recording a new podcast week to week. And I also want to say thank you always for supporting the Cana Girl Speaks podcast. Thank you for always watching on YouTube and listening on any of the podcast links. And so this evening, I have two gentlemen on that are going to come and talk about, different things, I guess. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves. They're going to tell a little bit about themselves. So we have John and we have Houston Clark. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello. How are you?
Thank you for being on the Cana Girl Speaks podcast.
Sure.
I'm so excited that you took the time out to come on. Mm-hmm. So why don't you tell the listening audience, those that are watching on YouTube and those that are listening on podcast links, who Houston Clark is and who John is. Houston, you want to start first?
Go for it.
Sure. Well, I'm currently, I retired a few years ago, and currently my wife and I are developing a farm-to-table venue out in a little unincorporated area of the county called Purdon, and that takes up a good bit of my time. We're in the process of developing those components so that when people come onto the property for whatever reason, they can pick the produce that we're growing, and if they want meat, we have choices for them there too. So super excited about it. Yeah.
John?
My name's Jonathan Wilson. I've lived in Corsicana now 4 years.
Okay.
My wife is the director of the library. That's how we got here. She has a PhD in library science, and she's very passionate about what she does. And at the time, we were living in California, and I told her that I would go anywhere in the country she wanted to go. Here's where we ended up.
So you came to Corsicana.
We came to Corsicana.
Corsicana. So I have been to Purdon Groves. Mm-hmm. And it's out in the country. Yes. And if you want to know where Purdon Groves is, you can probably Google it. I mean, I know they even have a TikTok on Purdon Groves. Mm-hmm. And so, John, we wanted to talk about Habitat for Humanity.
Yes,
so that's one of the main reasons why we wanted to come on and talk about that organization, that program. So why don't you give a little bit of talk about the Habitat for Humanity here in Corsicana, in County?
So Habitat for Humanity in Corsicana has been, it's about 16 years now. We've built 15 houses. I've only been in the last 2, but we've built 15 houses. Mm-hmm. It's a great way for people to get an opportunity to own a house that maybe they would never ever get to own a house.
So when you talk about Habitat for Humanity, and I'm familiar with the program, you said you've built how many houses now? 16?
So 16. I think we're on our 16th house now.
16. So why don't you tell those that are watching and listening, how does a program, how can you get into the program?
So the program always starts with an application.
Mm-hmm.
I'll warn you, they ask for lots of information. The application process is it's completely doable. It's just there's a lot of information.
So when do you need to apply for? Because I know there's a certain time of season.
So right now would be a great time to get your application. It would give you a couple months to get it filled out, and then applications need to be in by January. I think the magic date is about the 20th, but I'm not positive.
Not positive. Okay, yeah. And so once you get the application in, what's the process?
So once the application goes in, it's taken out of our hands. We send them all to what we refer to as Big Habitat.
Big Habitat, yeah.
Big Habitat really just refers to the sort of corporate portion of it in Dallas. And because of things in the banking industry, we are effectively the biggest subpar lender in the country.
Wow.
If you take all of Habitat together. And we're really not a good bank because we don't even collect interest.
Really? So once you get through that process, then what's the next process?
So, for example, in the previous year, we started with, I believe it was 22 applications. And it boiled down to 2 people.
Wow.
And once those 2 people came through the process, they were interviewed by a committee from Habitat. And actually this year, we had the fortunate or unfortunate event of having 2 houses.
Oh,
so
wow.
Each one of them actually got a house.
Wow. So have they been built?
One of them will be built. We have stakes in the ground, and we're contracting for a foundation person right now. The other one is completed and has actually been completed for about 7 years. The people who owned it, it was just an unfortunate story where they stopped making payments.
Oh wow! So there are payments. So
Yes.
so explain that, because sometimes when you think about Habitat for Humanity, you think, oh, there's free housing.
No. It's not a free house. It's actually anything but a free house. What happens is we have a lot of volunteers that come and we build a house. And as part of building that house, if you're picked, you have to invest over 200 hours of sweat equity, and some of it can be yours, some of it can be families. There's a whole formula for that. I'm not real familiar with that part. But we build a house. And at the end, the hour cost for building the house, and because we do have to pay for things like we pay for the foundation, we've discovered that it's easier to pay for people to do the wall boards and some of the insulation and stuff like that. But once we built the house, whatever our cost is gets passed along, and you get a 20 to 25 year mortgage. The reason I say it's 20 to 25 years is because we pick a number that the person can comfortably live with.
So they do pay. They pay mortgage,
Yes.
and like you said, then this recent person wasn't able to maintain it, right?
Well, there was one person. I mean, out of 15 years, apparently they've had to repossess 2 houses.
Oh, okay.
This was just an unfortunate moment.
Yeah.
They hadn't paid in over 24 months, and we worked with them. I mean, our goal is never to. We don't want to own this house again.
Yeah.
It was never the goal to own this house again. And in fact, it was very painful because it involved a physical eviction. I mean, the gentleman stood there while we removed all of his property from the house.
So has the house been, is anybody living in the house now?
No. Right now the house is not being lived in, but it's taken us about 6 months to get it cleaned up and and it should be ready for somebody in the next 2 to 3 months.
So how important is it for the organization to know, like, the community, to know, like salary base, that kind of, because, home ownership is very important.
Yes.
But, sometimes, we dive into it not really understanding the whole, process of home ownership.
Yes, and I agree that it's very important to understand the process. I would argue that one of the things as a group that we have not done particularly well is teaching the home ownership part.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize until, I grew up in a family where we had a mortgage. And,
Yeah.
My parents, they never talked about how much the mortgage was, but you always talked about paying the mortgage. And it was explained to me how the mortgage, when you pay your mortgage, it's really in 3 parts. There's 4 parts, I guess. So there's the payment to the bank, which is both interest and principal. And then there's a piece that's held back for insurance, and there's a piece that's held back for real estate taxes. And, But I remember my parents telling me about that a long time ago.
So you have because I know Corsicana, I know my community. So you have a community of people some of them, like I said, don't know.
Right.
And I know we have Habitat for Humanity. But, it's just important, to me, I feel like if you're going to bring a program like that, to bring the education piece of it.
Yes,
and that's even with even type of home ownership, even if you're, trying to, I've held home ownership, courses here to no avail. Nobody showed up. And so sometimes people are just not ready, they're not ready. And so, I mean, sometimes your eyes are bigger than, and then you eat more than you can chew, And so it's just all about education.
It is. That's one of the things that the board, John and I are both on the board, but that's one of the things the board's been heavily in discussions with the last probably year, I think, at least, is making sure not only that someone can financially qualify, but has the education so that they know how to budget and be prepared to make that a priority in their budgeting. And if you haven't grown up that way, sometimes that's not just sort of instinctual.
Yeah.
And, I think that's one of the things that crushes us the most is if someone can qualify financially but isn't really ready from a commitment to keep that mortgage, because it's an incredible gift.
Yeah.
And most people really want that, and so we want to help find the right people and educate them.
Yeah, because sometimes you have those generational situations where families are renters. They've been renters forever, and so home ownership is just not in their view.
And along those lines, we get the problems where you have to explain to people that this is your house. The good or bad news about owning your own house is you can do anything you want to it.
Yeah.
You want to paint it purple like Barney the dinosaur? Great, go for it.
Yeah.
If you want to put a nail in the wall, great.
Yeah.
The bad news is if you put a nail in the wall and hit a pipe, it's your problem too.
That's
right?
true too.
You don't get to call the landlord.
So, is there certain areas where y'all are building these houses?
Most of them have been. There's one called Joya Circle. It's behind. It's behind the Salvation Army, sort of. We did a whole set down by the Ezra Carroll School, and honestly, I don't think it's about picking a neighborhood or anything else. It's about where we get property.
Yeah, because the property's given to you.
The property's been given to us.
Okay.
So the current one we're on is on. I think if I'm saying it's 4th Avenue, I believe, not 4th Street.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was. We had property, as I said, over by the Ezra Carroll School. I think it's 13th Street.
It is.
13th Avenue. I'm never sure.
13th Avenue.
I can't do my avenues and streets.
Yeah.
Yes. And that property was donated to us, and we actually had another 10 lots behind it, and we had hoped that the city was going to put a road in so that we could build on those 10 lots. The city basically told us they weren't going to put in a road because it was very expensive and it's not in the budget.
Yeah.
And we got fortunate enough that through a chance meeting between our board member and a school board member, they made a trade, and they traded the property that's over there by the Ezra Carroll School because they can then put pods or parking lots or whatever else they want on that property. And they gave us my understanding it was the old G.W. Jackson School, which
some of that property,
yes,
where the Boys and Girls Club is located.
Right. And in fact, when we dug our first foundation, we found a piece of the old school.
So I did hear that.
We buried it again for now.
Yeah, I did hear that. So how can somebody volunteer for the organization?
Volunteering is actually really, really simple. So we've if you're over 18, show up at the build site, and on a Saturday morning at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, we will feed you breakfast and we will put you to work.
And
it's really simple.
You don't have to have previous experience doing that. There's a lot of mentoring that goes along with being able to help. So
do y'all solicit for volunteers?
We're always soliciting volunteers. We have a volunteer coordinator who is forever soliciting. Churches, most of the Navarro teams come and do it because I guess they all have service requirements.
From the college.
From the college. So we're forever hoping for people.
So who started Habitat for Humanity?
So my understanding is it was started by Father Monk. And
like a national.
That one I don't know.
Don't know.
No, I know it started in the Atlanta area. I know the former president Jimmy Carter is very still built houses in that area.
Yeah.
I grew up about 45 miles from his home in South Georgia, so I've always been aware of it. Never had an opportunity to plug in until I moved here, and John and I became friends, and he was on the board and invited me to. So
to keep it fresh on people on your people's mind as far as in the community, it's just all about just continue just to push it out there, because sometimes you go quiet and I'm like, they still around, and so that's the important piece of it.
I mean, for us, the quiet part is really that our biggest fundraiser every year was called Meet and Skeet. It was usually held in the end of September, beginning of October. And that was a place where we made a lot of noise. We had a lot of really good people that would donate stuff to us. And of course, all the shotguns make a lot of noise. But we haven't had that for 3 years, and we weren't able to put it together this year. We are exceptionally grateful to the community because a lot of people are still donating pretty good money and recognizing our cause.
We have a very giving community. I can't say that. Yeah. I can't say that. So what do you see the future of Habitat? Is it going to continue to grow? And, as far as that, because it is a nonprofit, nonprofit organization. So
I'm glad you asked that. Yeah. We're in our awkward teenage years, is what I would say. And I say that because, like in Dallas, the people who pay the mortgages on those houses pay enough money that they've got 2 or 3 houses going all the time. Yeah. And the money coming in just takes care of building all of the houses. Yeah. And they're able to have, full-time CEO, full-time CFO, people to take care of all of the things. Yeah. We've been very fortunate in the past to have people take care of the administrative stuff for no money. We're finally paying somebody for part-time, but in a perfect world, we would get to the place where we had one person full-time who just made sure that the trains ran on time, as it may be.
Yeah.
So we hope in the next year or so we'll be able to do that. That's probably our biggest challenge, and as far as the volunteer or the organization here in Corsicana has.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate the information, and I'm sure that those that are watching and those that are listening, how can they contact you if they want to get involved? And then also the application.
Yeah. So I never have the phone number at hand, but if you Google Habitat for Humanity of Navarro County,
okay,
you will call the office, which is over at which church is it? I can't remember. It's the Episcopal Church.
Okay.
Yes. Right.
Yes.
St. John's.
And you will speak to Janice, who's our manager, and Janice will be more than happy to send you an application.
Okay. And what about if you want to volunteer?
If you want to volunteer, you can also call Janice, and she will refer you to Mrs. Green. And Mrs. Green is our volunteer coordinator. And if I'm going to shout out to anybody, it's Mrs. Green. She does more work. She's really an amazing lady.
Okay. Well, Houston, so I want to say thank you for coming on.
Sure.
And just like I said, for telling us about Habitat for Humanity. I'm sure those that are listening and those that are watching on YouTube that get involved. And then if you know somebody that wants to try to get a house, tell them to go and contact Janice to get an application and fill it out, because they say they start making their decisions around January.
Absolutely.
So if I always give my guests an opportunity to give the shout out. So anybody like to give a shout out to? So go ahead and give a shout out.
I'm going to, and I'm going to screw this one up, but I want to shout out to all of our volunteers, all of our board members, and more than that, all of the local businesses who give us money and cut the bills and whatever else. We could not do that without all of these people. I mean, we have more and more amazing people come out there. I'm so amazed when we get things done in a huge way, and it's just because of our volunteers.
Well, that's awesome. Houston?
Well, I want to shout out our guests, maybe encourage those people that might be a little bit afraid of putting in an application and working through, seeing if they could end up owning their own home.
Yeah.
I would just encourage you to start the process now. And just because you're not selected this year doesn't mean you can't qualify another year.
Yeah.
So keep applying. Keep learning.
Yeah, we don't keep a list. We give out what we have, and there is no list. So if you don't, like Houston said, if you don't get your house this year, please put in it.
Try it again next time.
And you never know what happens. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you always for supporting this Cana Girl Speaks podcast. I always look forward to my guests and those that come on and talk about, what they're passionate about. And for those that are, just get into Habitat for Humanity. It's a very important organization, and it helps people get homes, families get homes. Yep. So y'all I'm going to go ahead and close out this podcast. So y'all have an awesome evening and have a good week. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a Legacy Recording Studio production.